Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What a beautiful day it is. A beautiful day to be alive. I'm so thankful to be alive. Thankful to God. Psalms 37, verses 17 to 20. For the arms of the wicked shall be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous. The Lord knows the days of the upright, and their inheritance shall be forever. They shall not be ashamed in the evil time. And in the days of famine they shall be satisfied. But the wicked shall perish, and the enemies of the Lord shall be as the fat of lambs. They shall consume into smoke, shall they consume away. And that's true of any situation and of any circumstance. It does not pay to do evil. What you put out there comes back on you, the law of karma. And it's so interesting that what I'm about to talk about is this judgment. That the very act that a person is trying to execute, the very action comes back on them. Let's get into a deeper look inside of Justice League. Today, we will look at Lady Justice executing her justice in the form of Above and Below that Zack Snyder loves to tell in his stories. Gods and men, gods and demons, gods and monsters. Let's get into it. So, in the beginning scene of Justice League, we see these white panel vans entering into London. But what you may not have caught is a statue of Lady Justice looking down on them on top of the court building. If you look here, here is Lady Justice seated on the court, and she's looking down on these panel vans. In fact, the panel vans stop right in front of her as they go to make their way into the entrances. We know that inside of these white panel vans are reactionary terrorists. But truly, a terrorist is someone who believes that judgment must be placed on a certain group of people. The reason, because they have done wrong. More than likely, they have sinned, and they are there to balance the scales. The irony of the situation is, when they go to do their evil plot against the innocent, Lady Justice, Justice is a lady. Lady Justice is weighing the scales on them. That's why I told you, every action you do has a similar reaction to you. It's called the law of reciprocity. So let's move on. So these terrorists, they come out as executioners to execute, in their case, what they consider justice. They are religious zealots. Most political terrorists are religious zealots. Hence the reason people talk a lot about radical Islamic terrorists. But in truth, we also have what we call the far-right Christian terrorist. And we've seen these terror groups in Russia. We've seen them in England. And we've seen them in the United States of America. Cult-like in their reasoning, they believe that their actions are justified. And this is no different for this terrorist here. But what I want you to understand is that when Lady Justice is sitting, weighing the scales on these terrorists as they come to her, do realize she is above them. Zack Snyder made a point as he's panning in, showing you the vans, to let you see Lady Justice in relation to them. And she sits above them. Remember, above and below has two meanings. Above in moral ethics versus below in moral ethics, which will be gods and demons. And then we have above and below in terms of power. Who has the power? Who's wielding the power? And so when the camera does above and below, you must think of it in those two terms. It's either one. Now let's move on. So, as I said before, you've seen the terrorist. He comes out, he is an executor of his version of justice. He is dressed in black and white, as if he's going to a funeral. His van, the vans, are white. White symbolizing purity. For this terrorist believes he is an agent of cleansing, the avenging angel. To avenge the world, reset it, and cleanse it. How many terrorists are like that? All of them. In fact, I would argue that the guy at Las Vegas who decided to take so many lives out of hate and spite because his life wasn't working out the way he thought it would be, is literally thinking he's cleansing the slate. In fact, most people who commit suicide think they're cleansing themselves and freeing themselves from this world. I can tell you, because I myself tried to commit suicide. So, do understand, to reset the clock, these terrorists, I want you to understand the minds of terrorists. These terrorists, they're making these extreme actions which are very destructive because they're held by fear and lack of hope, that their actions which they think are good and just and right are destructive. Let me inform you guys out there who have been bad talking this movie and speaking ill of it, so that you can cleanse the DCEU of this movie, that you're doing the very same thing this terrorist is doing, the very same thing the suicidal person is doing. You don't try to destroy something to get a better result. It comes back on you, and you will destroy yourself. Listen to me carefully again, because I will repeat this again. This is a law of life. If you live a life of destruction, he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. It is the law of reciprocity. It is known as karma, and is known by many other laws. What you desire others to do to you, do to them. That way, you cannot lose out. Think about the other side of the equation before you cast judgment. Let's move on. So as I said before, this executor, this avenging angel, this is what he thinks of himself as, though he's going to do an act of terror, as a political statement in this case, he's a bona fide political terrorist, but there are several terrorists in the world, not just political. Anyone who brings about terror and fear and scare in people's hearts is a terrorist. Don't let these people in the United States fool you. There are political terrorists, but there are also homegrown domestic terrorists. The act in Las Vegas was a terrorist act. It was nothing short of that. You can make excuses that he was out of his mind, which I do not buy. And neither does Zack Snyder. And neither does Everybody Knows, which is what the song was telling you. Everybody knows this person meant no good for anyone. So an act of terror is to be considered that. And most people who are terrorists are out of their minds. They may be logical in their reasoning and thinking, but they're out of their minds. So please, stop trying to whiten up its issues and actions of people who are white because they're white. The guy who drove his car into the protesters in Carolina, I believe it was, protesting the statue, he's a terrorist. That's an act of terror. And no one, Islamic, white, Mexican, black, no one should ever commit an act of terror and it not be condemned for that. It doesn't mean we stay in fear and we don't continue our lives. Absolutely not. But every terrorist must be treated as a terrorist. They tried to bring about fear and terror in people's hearts. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't play politics with people who do not care about humanity. We must put our foot down. And I thank Zack Snyder for pointing this out. He chose to use a 45 to 55-year-old man. And he didn't do it because he hates white people or he doesn't want white people to do well. Some of my friends, my best friends, are white people, and they're awesome people. He did it for humanity. It has nothing to do with race. We must balance the scales. Do you know why? Lady Justice is watching. She's watching you. She's watching. Let's continue. Above and below. Now the terrorist ascends the steps of power, judgment, and justice because he's going in a courtroom, Old Bailey. He ascends those steps while they take by force, by oppressive force and fear, instilling into the hearts of people as they shoot and gun down the defense systems of the courthouse and start commanding people to go into huddles and groups. They are proliferating fear, proliferating terror, which was the entire point. Agents of chaos, they are now in control. They are now in power. And so Zack Snyder captures that in a shot. Now we look above this human who has become a god to us. We look from below. We see his object of terror, the bomb inside of his case. As we look up at him, he's larger than life. He has taken center stage. His message of fear dominates and cripples us. The message of hope is all but gone. And as he is at the top of the courthouse, as he's at the top of judgment, as he is terrorizing justice, he has infiltrated her and he is terrorizing her. He looks down on the mayhem he has caused. All protective agencies, all means of executors of law, they are below him. He looks down at them as a god. They are at his command. They are subject to his message of fear and his judgment. He is God, above and below. Zack Snyder. He then tips his hat to an observer looking at him from a great distance. This observer is looking at him through a scope. The observer and he are on the same level, meaning they are at the same level of power. They have the same mind. They're executing the same plan. This observer with the scope, more than likely, is a terrorist as he is executing. Now, I will infer that this person with the scope is Deadshot, or more than likely, Deathstroke. Deathstroke. The Deathstroke could be the one that's looking at him through a scope to make sure he executes the plan of some other sinister person who's behind this. Possibly Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor. However, as I said before, Lady Justice was looking down on these men. As you can see here, these are the two vans of the terrorist. And this is the police vehicles. And there's a commotion down here. As you can see all the police officers down there as they're now circling the building. But from on high, Lady Justice has her two scales. And Zack Snyder makes a point to come from the scales of balance. And then we see above and below Lady Justice looking down. And then we reach the scales and Zack Snyder twists the photo to look up at Lady Justice from below. We are now looking up at her as the god of judgment. And in her right hand of power is Lady Justice embodied in Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is looking down and seeing the commotion as Lady Justice is looking down. And now the embodiment of justice is there to defend and to balance the scales. Zack Snyder made a point of showing the scales of Lady Justice. And now we have a second avenging angel. This angel executes judgment and justice. Now, for those of you who may not understand what I'm saying, there is a parallel between Wonder Woman and Superman. Steppenwolf, just like the terrorists that we see in this small-scale attack on a courthouse, a house of justice. Similarly, Steppenwolf came in to execute his act of terror on the earth, to terraform it, destroy all occupants, and convert them into his slaves, to ensnare the world in fear and darkness. But Superman, when Steppenwolf said, "You are too weak to know the truth," Superman answered, "I know truth, but I'm also a big fan of justice. Of justice. And that is because justice is always watching, always weighing the scales, and casting judgment from above. And this is the justice we see here as we're introduced to this movie. And Wonder Woman is seen from above, and then we pan upwards to a godlike state to see how she feels about this. And she's distressed. She pulls her hand away from the sword of Lady Justice, and she looks down, and the god comes down to earth to speak with man. The great Greek mythology brought to life in superhero movies. Now, as I said before, the terrorists, they are as gods. And so when we pan upwards, seeing the terrorist with his gun walking around, we see him from below. For he is now walking with a different status. He is now a god to other men. And so we look at him from below, looking upwards at him. However, Wonder Woman comes down from her godlike perch, from justice, to speak with the gods of men. And she lassos this man with her lasso of truth. Now, amazingly, in this movie, truth as well has a dual meaning. Truth represents power, pure power, and truth also is honesty. There are dual meanings in this story. So when she comes down with a lasso of truth, it is both powerful and it is also about honesty. And she pulls this godlike man who has gotten godlike status and attention upwards to her to speak with him and to demand of him what he is doing, for justice and judgment is a god. And so he is ascended to the area of God, seeing he has called himself God. Then amongst the gods you will go, and you will speak with them. Greek mythology. And so she draws him up to herself, and we see he is below her, for she is now judge. And she will ask the questions, and she interrogates him. He cannot deny her, for her power is too much for him. Lady Justice will balance her scales. But this we have seen as well with Superman. When Superman came back, he assaulted Batman, knocked him away, and then he grabbed him by the neck and carried him up to the godlike place from whence he came. And then he interrogated him. He said to him, "Why did you bring me back?" He said, then Batman says, "The world needs you." And then the god said, "You wouldn't let me live. You wouldn't let me die." Tell me, do you bleed? He came back as a god with the godlike power, but with a lost sense of humanity. In this case, Diana pulls this god man up to herself, and she demands of him what he's doing, what they are all doing, meddling in the area of the gods. And he answers, both in resentment and fear, for he does not know this God. And he says, we have seen that the sins of the world have brought on this plague of aliens. To which she said, why? Why the hostages? And then he says, you are too late. In a couple seconds, boom, 4 city blocks, and he laughs. And the guard watches with concern in her eyes. And then she executes judgment. Remember, we have 2 executing judgment. We have the terrorists executing judgment, how they see fit. And we see Lady Justice herself executing judgment, having assessed the situation. The difference between justice and what these terrorists think is justice is they never give. They never give the other side a say to clarify, inquire of them, come down to them, their level, and find out why they are doing what they're doing. But the God had to come down and inquire. In the meantime, the man who thinks he's God is executing justice how he sees fit. And he says, justice and judgment must be done. Down with the modern age. Back to the dark ages and holy fear. He believes he's cleansing the world. He's willing to die for what he believes. He believes this because he has no hope. He is filled with fear for what the future brings because of these aliens, these plague of aliens like locusts that are coming. And he believes mankind will best be served by getting rid of their technology. He is sent as an angel of his form of justice to execute this. This is what he believes. He believes it in his heart and soul. He is not the judge, but he's only a messenger, sent by a judge to do so and to execute. Failure is not an option, for there's another watching him. That if he fails, he will be assassinated. That's the one he tipped his hat to, who's probably Deadshot or Deathstroke. I beg to think it's Deathstroke, but it may not be. As he walks around, he walks as a god, and even now we see that the captive prisoners here on this side, they are below him. He is shooting down at them. But Lady Justice interrupts, takes the bomb that is his weapon, his sacred cleanser, and turns it out so that it is harmless. When he tries to fire on the people, she comes down from above yet again. She ascends into heaven to defuse the bomb. She comes back down to earth, and she defends those who cannot defend themselves. As Wonder Woman has always said, she is a defender of the oppressed and those who cannot defend themselves. This is what she said to Hippolyta, to her mother, before she left. And she comes down from the heavens. But this time, as she's protecting them, her eye, her all-seeing eye, is on this God. This man who thinks he's a God to execute judgment in error. Judgment itself has come down to judge you, to judge your actions and to weigh whether you are right or wrong. She has fought gods. She has fought men. You are neither a god nor a man. Batman's saying would actually apply here. You're not a god. You're not even a man. And the look she gives in her face says it all. She's saying, my child, you have made a fatal error for which you must pay. The judgment is about to begin. And while these are afraid of you, because you're as a god to them with your weapon, I judge you. I stoop to their level to protect them. And I will protect them. My children. I will protect them. But my eyes are on you. And you must balance the scales. You must pay. And after the god realizes that his great power is useless against this creature, as she ascends to his level to speak to him on a human plane, as she rises up from below him, and their eyes meet, and the true God, the God of truth and justice, stands at the level of the man instead of imposing her godlike state on him. She stands at his level. And he stares in disbelief and in fear. The very fear he was trying to implant on his fellow men that made him a god. Now, that fear consumes him, just as it consumed Steppenwolf. And then he says, I don't believe it. And then he says, what are you? And the god answers, a believer, before she blasts him to kingdom come. And justice and judgment is served. They didn't show this part of the movie where this huge explosion happened after she blasted him to kingdom come. Into smithereens, into particles, into dust. See, ladies and gentlemen, I read the Bible. I read it, and I can see it in these movies. Justice is not a physical woman. But in superhero movies, these characters embody these attributes. Why would Justice be a woman? I'll tell you why. And wisdom. Because they are the bearer of their children. They carry us. Women are beautiful. They are a wonder of the world. You will never find a stronger love and bond than a woman for her child. It is fitting that justice be personified as a woman. Justice without love will be evil. This man is evil because he tries to execute justice without love. But you must have love to be fair. You cannot operate and be just out of hate or fear. That is why Lady Justice is a woman. Because included in justice is mercy, integrity, honesty, not just purity, not just power. Wonder Woman embodies using power to defend, protect, preserve. Being fear, letting the scales be balanced, is what Zack Snyder is showing you in this beautiful illustration of truth. I can't say how much I appreciate Zack Snyder. I know Deborah has a lot to do with it. I know Zack is very, very perceptive. Patty Jenkins was able to elucidate this in beautiful terms. But above and below here was used to show you what justice is, what right decrees and right measurement and right judgment is. And I wanted to spend a good amount of time on this because it's relevant to us today. See her sit in the position of power, but she does not abuse her power. She wants justice to be fair. She wants justice to be kind. It must not be oppressive. It must not destroy that which is innocent. Justice, judgment, equity. This is what the Lord was speaking from his mouth. Why he said, wisdom is a woman, not a man. Consideration for others, the context in something. Empathy. They are all wrapped in justice. That is why Gal Gadot is not some macho-looking woman trying to be a man. She must be a woman. Wonder Woman must be a woman. Because there's beauty in women. And just being women. There's a power. An untapped power that women have. That men do not have. We don't have it. We don't. There's a balance of energies, male and female, each complementing each other. Powerful. Which is why wisdom is not a man and never will be. And justice is not a man either. The Greeks knew it. The Bible has written it that way. All ancient cultures understand it to be so. Latin American languages such as Spanish call justice justicia. It is feminine for that purpose. Understand the depths of these things. I am not a New Ager. I'm not into the New Age movement. These are truths. I do not lie to you. Look at her. Take care of her children. She says it. Children. I deal with children. Of course you deal with children. You're 1,000 years old. You're a millennia. You've been around long enough to know how these children behave. Another thing that's beautiful about Wonder Woman is she's very old. She's ancient. She's seen this before in different forms. Lady Justice was looking down, and we see the embodiment of the execution of justice. It doesn't happen that rapidly, usually, but it does happen. And we see the void, the difference between hopelessness, bringing about destruction, and hope. If I were to say something to some of my white brothers and sisters who feel that Americans are being shortchanged by foreigners coming into their country, because I'm a foreigner, I'll say this. don't be afraid of foreigners coming into your country. Trust that your defense systems are good, perceptive. Encourage them. But don't be afraid of some new culture or some new group or some new people coming into your country. And don't be afraid of the change. In this day and age, mechanization seems to be taking over everything, and people are losing their jobs to machines. But I'll tell you this. Learn how to use machines, as was written into the script of this movie. Machines can be a benefit to mankind or a hindrance to them. They don't have souls. Nonetheless, we can, as people, move forward in a direction using them. I say all of this to say to you guys, we must be plastic with the times and be able to change with them. Be able to adapt. Look how quickly you guys know how to use the internet. Look how quickly you've learned how to use smartphones and all these things. You're learning so fast to learn technology. And now you know you have the capability of knowledge to access it anywhere. But don't become lazy drones. Don't become so subject to your routines, traditions, and patterns that you feel helpless without them. Adapt. Grow. Embrace the future with hope. Hope. Be hopeful. But you say, how can I be hopeful in a world where I'm scavenging for food? Poverty is a mindset. It's a mindset. I'm not saying it's easy to become rich. I'm not saying it's easy to do anything in this world. But what I'm saying to you is you can do it. You're powerful. You don't have to oppress other people to feel powerful. True power inspires people, protects people. That is Lady Justice. That is Lady Judgment. Take ownership on your voice and use it for the good. Hope is the potential of each and every person to be a force for good. Believe it. It's true. The little you do has an impact on many. Seize hold of your power. You have immense power. You just don't know it. But you have to get out of the shadows. You have to risk being ridiculed. You have to risk the blowback. You know, when they were opening up the mother boxes, Cyborg said, major blowback. But I think we can take it. I think we can take it. I'm telling you today. I know there's some women out there who know what I'm talking about, because you guys can take it. But for us men, this may be new to us. Keep the course. Do not flinch. You can take it. I want you to feel that power running through you. It's not just Wonder Woman that has that power. Every one of you have it. To be a force for good. To see things blossom. Become greater than you. To see people around you become better than even you. You have that power. But you must use it. It's only a potential now. But you are an engine changer. You are a change engine. You are a mother box. And they use your power against you. They trick you into feeling you must believe in this one or that one or the other one when you just have to believe in yourself. Let me tell you what government is for. The government was never there to mind or mine you or mine you, harvest you either. But they manipulate you a lot in the media. Think about how much the government actually has anything to do with your personal experience, your day-to-day experience with other people. Very little. They do put the framework and laws in place which give you the freedoms to do so, which are very important. But in your day-to-day routines and your dealings with people you meet, whether they are police officers or whoever, that's in your control for the most part. You're not a victim of anything if you free your mind to think that way. No matter the circumstance, you can make the most of it. I advise each and every one of you to go watch Zack Snyder's film Sucker Punch. I'll do a review on it. I will have a discussion on that movie. That movie is so empowering, it's not funny. Of a woman trapped in a very oppressive situation, and yet she was able to free her mind from it. And I need you guys to see that movie. It's a powerful movie. It's a Zack Snyder movie. I want to say one more thing. As this movie is going to make its box office, probably will pass 600 million in a couple of days, if it hasn't passed it already. And as the awareness and the truth of it comes to light, I just want to say this last thing. I want to say to you guys that I believe Zack Snyder's vision for this movie, though actualized, is one which is still bare bones. I've said it over and over again. And I will say it one more time. I do want to see Zack Snyder's cut of this movie, meaning his version. However, I have said it and I will say it again. We need this movie to succeed, 1, and 2. We need to understand what it is we saw. And so I want people to have an appreciation of the movie we're seeing in theaters now, before it has to leave the theaters and then people come to have appreciation for what happened. I also want to thank Zack Snyder for allowing Joss Whedon to go on with this project. Because Zack, I know he had a specific way he wanted to really do this movie, and I'm sure it needed some air to really flush out those bigger things he wanted to say. And I could just see from just this bare bones part of this bare bones movie, that is Zack's, definitely Zack's, this bare bones movie, that it's incredible how rich it is. I tell you again, I make no apologies. This is the second best DCEU movie besides Batman v Superman Ultimate Cut and theatrical cut. And this movie has so much to offer you that Zack was really pouring out his guts on. And Joss Whedon tried to harmonize with that. For the most part, he did a good job in 2 hours. Like I said, Zack would not have been able to do, I don't think he would have been able to do as good a job in 2 hours that Joss Whedon did. So it's a hell of an effort Joss Whedon gave in this movie, and I compliment him on it. And he stayed true to Zack's vision. May have added a thing or two that I didn't particularly take to. One of the issues being the Flash pushing Wonder Woman and ending up on top of her. And I just didn't think that was good for so many different reasons. But that's a petty critique because a lot of people actually laughed at it. It's a petty critique, but I didn't like it. I didn't appreciate it. Other than that, and a couple other things I saw, which nothing you could do about it. It was just what it is, CGI wise. Joss Whedon pulled off a hell of a job. A hell of a job. Joss Whedon, my hat's tip off to you, brother. That's a hell of a thing. To follow in the footsteps of this incredible director cut down all the stuff to the bare bones of what he was really saying in 2 hours. Do you understand how much Zack Snyder said in 2 hours? Do you guys even understand what went into your head in 2 hours? I tip Joss Whedon's hat off. Hats off to you, Joss Whedon. He had Danny Elfman rework the stories, the soundtrack, so that he could find a way to fit it together. And Danny Elfman was, he's worked with Danny so many times. Instead of trying to loggerheads or maybe clash heads with Junkie XL, or just have a harder time with Junkie XL and the musical style that Junkie XL was going for, he just said, you know what, hell with it. Warner Brothers, I would like to get Joss Whedon on board, Danny Elfman on board, and he just rocked with Danny Elfman. Okay. And the only person I really feel for is Junkie XL in this whole thing. Because Junkie was pouring his heart out on the soundtrack of this thing. And if you hear the soundtrack that Junkie XL was doing in the sneak peeks and the trailers, oh my God! I know he was going for it. He was going for the home run. But it's all good. It's all good. If this movie does well, we're going to get a cut of Zack Snyder's unabridged version, which I will die to see because I love Zack Snyder. And I know if he really gets to do what he really wants to do, because unfortunate circumstances made him have to leave the project. If he really gets to do what he really wants to do, oh my God, it's going to be crazy. But even so, guys, I'm going to say this again. I do not blame WB for meddling, as I did not blame WB for Suicide Squad and what they did there. They went through a process. They did their process. That's what they got from screenings. But I would like to say that this particular cut is very precious to me, because I believe that Marvel and DC for the first time united, and it's a shame, it's a crying shame that both Marvel and DC fans enjoyed this film and people got caught up in false rumors and fake information and blaming and hate. It's a shame. We use our powers to destroy instead of build. Instead of inspiring and bringing hope, we succumb to fear and hate. And I'm guilty of it as anyone else, because I've been calling the people who have been trashing this film and attacking Joss Whedon and Warner Brothers unjustifiably. Unjustifiably. I told you Lady Justice be watching everything. It's going to come back on you. Unjustifiably, I started to name call them fake fans and fair weather fans. And I started succumbing to hate. And at a certain point in time, I was like, damn Zack Snyder's cut. I don't want to see his cut. Screw that. Because of these fake-ass fans. This is what was going through my mind. Because I started to succumb to hate. But we have to have hope, folks. And we need to inspire people. We need to correct them, but inspire them. And we have that power. That's why I'm taking so long with this video talking about it. You have the power. Dave the Film Junkie. Film Gub. You guys were wrong about Whedon, about WB, about Zack Snyder. That I can tell you. But one thing I will say is, I cannot harbor hate for you. It's all love. People make mistakes. But in the future, fact check your stuff. Critically assess and think about what people are saying. When the leaks came out about the Flash's stuff being not there, now of course Warner Brothers got in control of that quickly. We saw that it was unfinished cuts, and that stuff was filtered out before Zack even left. He realized that he couldn't put in the Flash scenes. He had some, maybe he was going to put it in, maybe. But at the end of the day, you have to cut down this movie for time. Now you can say, how come Warner Brothers didn't learn their lesson with BVS? That cutting down a movie for time to play more in cinemas just won't work. Well, probably because they laid it out earlier, they thought, and then saw Wonder Woman did well and was about 2 hours and something. Yes, it's a little bit about greed. They tried, when they realized it could go down to 2 hours and 30, they probably said, well, 2 hours straight. Even though I strongly believe they wanted it at 2 hours straight. I don't know how you could have a movie that ties up everything in 2 hours straight. That's why I said Joss Whedon did a hell of a job. So I do see where you guys are coming from in terms of their ridiculous demands, it seems. Because Zack Snyder was never going to do a 2 hour cut. It was never going to happen. He was never going to get it that down. It's just no way. Too detailed. Joss Whedon's more focused. No way Zack was going to make it. That was too much pressure on Zack. That was another reason why he left. But the one thing I would say is that in spite of those demands, and it backlashed on WB major time because they didn't cater for rumors as well, but it backlashed on them. They should learn a lesson to leave the directors. Have confidence in your directors. Let them do the vision they have. You do the screening process. And if it's a 3 hour long movie, let it be a 3 hour long movie. Let it be a 3 hour long movie. Let the director do what they think is best. Of course, you're going to have to do screenings, and if it don't work out too well, because the last thing you want to do is have the core DCEU fans against you. And they were like, 3 strikes, you're out, motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? I understood where they're coming from. I had the same fears. I just thought that this movie was damn good, and therefore somehow they managed to pull it out of their ass and get it done. And so I was okay with it. But obviously other DCEU fans were pissed because they had seen trailers and stuff and saw how grand this movie was shaping up to be, and then they went and spoiled the thing. You're going to spoil everything. You're going to watch everything. You're going to be expecting something extra. You know what I'm saying? The one thing I want to say, though, because this video is pretty long and I don't mind, the one thing I want to say is, besides spoiling the movie for yourself, my dear fans, the other thing you have to think about is, just imagine if everything that you saw in the trailers, you saw in the movie. You know what you'd have gone come back and say? It's alright. You know why? Because you saw everything in the trailers. Like people are thinking. So it's actually a good thing you didn't see some of the stuff in the trailers in the movie. Think about what I'm saying. They might have been a high spot of the movie, but I'm glad he didn't see it. So, in a way, you have to think it's a double-edged sword, trying to please people. So I wanted to say all those things. To all the journalists out there, have some integrity. Fact check your stuff. Show how verifiable your information is before you put it out there. Don't try and just get clickbait. And the other thing, for those critics and journalists and people who did not like Zack Snyder's film, Justice League, just a caveat in there. Say, this ain't my kind of movie. Just put it in there. Be honest. I have a certain taste of movies. I like movies where, especially comic book movies, I think of them a certain way. They must have a certain format. Just say that. That'll help everything. That'll make everything right. Because it's your perspective, your point of view. And then say that you can see how certain people would like this movie. Be able to see both sides of the equation. Justice, equity, judgment. That's what this video is all about. Above and below. Don't go low. Don't be a sleazeball. Don't be a jackass. Don't be a jerk. Don't be a dickhead. These days, dickheads are getting caught. Huh? The Me Too movement's putting them on blast. So don't be a dickhead. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. This was a comprehensive video on justice, judgment, equity. Do understand that these metaphors that are embodied in these characters in this film are real. One thing about a Zack Snyder film you're going to find out. One thing about the DCEU you will find out is there's depth. As the gentleman who plays Commissioner Gordon said, there's a little bit more oomph in these movies than your typical comic book movie. People like to praise The Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises, Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan's things. I'm not saying don't praise Christopher Nolan. But the depth that I've gotten out of the DCEU, I did not get in any Christopher Nolan film. By the way, Batman Begins was over 3 hours long. Didn't do bad at the box office. I'm just saying. On that note, you guys have a great one.